Hello, and welcome to Realign Journey, the unfiltered guide to self-discovery and reconnection. I'm Sierra Sambrowski, your host, and together we'll deep dive the topics that have caused us to lose touch with ourselves and explore ways to reconnect to our true self. This week, I am joined by Samantha Schmuck. Samantha is a holistic life and embodiment coach who empowers individuals to reduce their chemical and emotional stress on their body. She does this through education, simple toxin-free swaps, and her fun and experiential vibe and embodiment program to release emotional stress through intuitive movement. Samantha has been a full-time coach for the last 8 years, working with over 1,000 individuals to create personal and professional alignment. Hi, Samantha. How are you today?
Hello, Sierra. I am so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. We did talk a little bit in the bio about your embodiment work. That's what we're really going to dig into today. I have all kinds of personal experience and thoughts about this, so I can't wait to hear about yours. But let's start with sort of people become very disembodied. And
Mm-hmm.
I have seen and witnessed a lot personally in my own personal journey, as well as witnessing it in other people. Um, this disembodiment can often come as a way to contain their emotions when they're not
Mm-hmm.
processing or avoiding them. I mean, is that
Mm-hmm.
really the experience that you see?
I think it can come from kind of multiple different points, but definitely that numbing and not wanting to feel the emotion is one of the biggest ways we disconnect because our body gives us sensation and our emotions are sensation in the body. And so if we're feeling too much and we're feeling too much feedback from our body and we don't know how to feel it, we don't know how to process it, then yes, we're 1000% going to disconnect. But then I always love to really think about going all the way back to when we're little. We get different messages of like, shh, don't be too loud, or all of these things that we're feeling a certain way in our body. We want to express this buoyant, bubbly energy. And then someone calls us out and are like, hey, don't be that. Hey, don't do that. Or we go into the school system and we're taught we've got to get up at a certain hour, no matter how tired we are. We have to eat at a very specific time, no matter if we're hungry or not. And we have this structure and regimen that all of a sudden we're forced into, and our body might be giving us different feedback, but we have to ignore it in order to stay within that structure, within that system. Then if you take anybody who did performing arts, athletics, anything like that, especially, 20, 30 years ago, there very much was that messaging of mind over matter, push through, work harder. And all of those messagings combined really makes it be like, well, why should I listen to my body? Everybody else is telling me to do these different things. And so we start to outsource that wisdom to other people versus really listening to our own body, our own intuition.
Oh my gosh. I don't know why I never thought about all of that like that. You're so right though. You're so right because it really does, our body always is an indicator of some way. Like that's exactly how I often work with people that have some kind of trauma that they've recently, and there becomes this disconnect, and I'm like, just start noticing in your body. Am I pulling my shoulders up? Am I feeling a weird tightness in my forearm? Like all
Mm-hmm.
these different little, we start to get these body indicators, and yet we are 100% programmed from such a young age. I really didn't think about it, that it doesn't matter what your body's telling you. You just do what you're told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you can definitely go, and those are like a lot of the subtle ways that we wouldn't really think about that we're disconnecting from our body. But then you
Yeah.
have those more macro or bigger ways where there was sexual abuse. There was an injury. So for me, it was gymnastics. My full body became inflamed. And all of a sudden, this vehicle that I trusted to do all these really cool things with was so painful to be in all of a sudden. And I didn't want to
Mm.
feel that pain. I didn't want to feel the change in my life that it created without answers. And so I disconnected in order to survive, in order to make it through the daily. So there are all the way from those like really subtle ways to something bigger that takes place that says, hey, it's not safe to be in your body to feel this.
Yeah. Wow. I really, I got to almost process all that for a second. Like I said, I didn't even really think about all these other ways. Like I said, I've always kind of associated it back to some kind of emotional trauma or containment of not wanting to emotionally feel things. But certainly the programming that we get, or like in your situation where you had a physical injury and there was now pain in your body, um, makes you not want to be in your body also.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of layers that
Hmm.
you got to look at. So I love when you're working with people, you like always the first step that I start with is awareness. Like you have to start building that awareness. And it might feel really weird at first or confusing of like, what am I supposed to be aware of? But just to start to hold space to listen and to hear that feedback, like you said, you might be having a conversation and why am I feeling this random pain in my forearm right now? We might not connect those two things, but
Hmm.
when we can start to feel the tiniest of little feedback from our body, we start to just build so much more awareness of like, wow, every time I talk to this person in my family I'm estranged with, I get the worst low back pain. Like
Hmm.
it's super interesting to start to feel the sensation as you're in it versus just be like, man, I feel really uncomfortable in my body. And it's just like this mass amount of sensation versus being able to kind of pick apart and feel the layers of sensation.
Hmm. Hmm. You bringing up the example of talking with an estranged family member and experiencing low back pain kind of makes me think of like the Louise Hay models,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm a big Carolyn Miss fan, so I love all her stuff too. But it makes me wonder. Certainly, there's a very, and even in Chinese medicine, there's very uh clear distinction about many, obviously not everyone's, not always, but many of the times that we have a physical or a problem with an organ or a disease, it has this contribution to or rooted back to a very specific emotional underlying root. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but in the case of where somebody experienced some kind of physical trauma, like an injury, um, where they were in a bad car accident or something like that, is there still some kind of association that you've recognized in working with so many people, that there's still some kind of stored emotion that also is happening, that is continuing to inflame or cause
Mm-hmm.
other problems? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where like I will continue to always be a student of life because like there's so much to learn and there's so much nuance and like if I could learn everything in Chinese medicine, like Ayurveda, like literally all of
Mhm.
it, like I would just soak it up. I wish I had like multiple of me and like so much time in the day to
Yeah,
learn and
yeah.
just soak it all in. But there's this one quote. His name is John Sarno, and he has a book called The Divided Mind, The Epidemic of Mind Body Disorders. And he's talking a lot about that of like having physical proof and evidence of a bulging disc, of all of this physical proof of there's something being wrong, causing pain in the
Mhm.
body, but that it's even when they address the emotional connection that they're able to feel a release and more ease in that area. So I just think his work is so cool and incredible because it kind of points to that where his specific quote is something to the degree of um, like pain in the body is an amazing distraction from feeling what
Mhm.
we're feeling.
Mhm.
And that was the case for me. So even though I had a physical injury of inflammation that you could see with an MRI, they had no idea why it was there. And I grew up thinking that emotions were weak if you
Mm-hmm.
felt them. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up in a very stoic sport of competitive gymnastics, and I would just suppress everything that I was feeling
Mm-hmm.
and bottle it up, and until I couldn't bottle it up anymore, and I would just burst. And then I'd feel so much shame that I couldn't contain it anymore, that I just had to be stronger. And then I'm trying to like bury it down even deeper. And so one of the things, so I was like a year into my testing and they just weren't finding any answers. And I remember my dad being like, it's okay if you want to quit. Like, you don't have to go through all of this if you just want to quit, because they were starting to think like, is she making it up? Like, yes, we see inflammation, but there's all of her tests are coming back fine. Like, we don't know how to help her. And I was so mad at him in that moment. I'm like 12 years old. I'm like, why would you think I'm making this up? Why would you think I want to change my entire life, my friend group, like all of these different things? And then fast forward 10 plus years, I read this book by John Sarno and I'm like, well, I'll be. These things really do exist where we do suppress so much of our emotions. And so our body starts to create this pain to give us something to focus on rather than the underlying emotions. So, even for your example of the car accident, like, yes, there's actual physical pain, there's whiplash, there's bruises, there's different things for your body to heal and process.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also that fear that got trapped
Sure. Yeah.
at impact. There's the worry, there's all of that new story from the accident
Mm-hmm.
that you have to process in addition to the physical pain.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. And really, I believe personally that um almost everything, whether it's an outside source of physical pain or an outside source of emotional pain, if it's undealt with in some way, it's going to show up in you in some other aspect. And
Mm-hmm.
I always say, usually what makes people listen, it's not even the ending of relationships, because I believe there's like a progression of a lot of
Yeah.
these things, or like you won't just see it in your physical health, you'll see it in these other areas of your life too, but it's whatever's most impactful. And for many of us, it's when all of a sudden there's so much pain in our body, or there's some kind of big disease, or there's something so significant that we physically can't go through life anymore. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
when you're like, all of a sudden, oh hell, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
There's something that I'm not facing here. Do you see in your work any particular emotion that seems to be more destructive maybe than others, or presents
Mm.
in more painful ways than other ways? Or is it really just about however that person is repressing?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a juicy question. I definitely would lean towards it's for sure the unique individual, but like emotions all hold a different frequency. And I wish I could remember the exact frequency off the top of my head, but like they all have a different frequency that they hold and that they feel in our body. And when I think of, I work predominantly with women, and women really, again, from that programming, we're taught to have it all together, be light and
Mm-hmm.
fluffy and
Mm-hmm.
elegant and this. And so, what is like the polar opposite of that demeanor? Anger.
Mm-hmm.
Anger is ugly. It is potent. It is all consuming and rage filled. And it gets your entire body, your heart rate, like your fist, like you feel this visceral reaction when you have anger. But yet, we don't know a safe or healthy way to often express it without then being judged or labeled as something for having those emotions. And so I feel like for a lot of women, anger is one of those things that when we don't process it, it can be one of the most destructive, because it's such a potent and intense energy that's racing through the body.
Mm-hmm. And it shows up in all kinds of different faces, I imagine, like all different types of illnesses or pains, or not just one particular.
Yeah, I
Chinese
mean, that's
medicine tells
where,
you liver, right? Isn't liver thing?
yes,
Yeah.
anger like is specific to your liver, but that's where like John Sarno will talk about, if you start to work on a certain area of your body and you like physically, and then all of a sudden the pain moves, you're like, oh, I dealt with it, but it's just moving to another area. And so I feel like that's where you have like a primary area where the emotion heavily affects that one area, but then it kind of ripples where if that main organ, right, just from like a physical standpoint, if that main organ is overburdened, it's going to put an overburden on other areas of your body, become more sluggish, become more taxing to do. And so I just think of whatever emotion it is, whatever area of the body that it is attacking, it's causing more work for your entire system to have to do to feel its best. And that's where, for me, I know a lot of the last few years, I've been working through a lot of fear, and that's in your kidneys. And I remember just having this like deep aching pain in my back, and that's right where our kidneys are. And the more and more that I worked on processing it and moving through it, that area of my back started to not have this like just deep, it was such a deep ache in it. It wasn't even like shooting pains or anything like that, just this like deep radiating ache.
I think it's really interesting. Again, you have genius points. I think it's so interesting to hear you say too, like I didn't think about it, like that part of that migration of the pain doesn't mean the emotion went away, but because your whole body is taking up and compensating for wherever that one area is being drawn all the energy and attention. As soon as you alleviate it there, then it allows kind of the weakness to move to where the other areas have been pulling all that energy and attention from to be able to deal with the one that was over here, right? And so part of listening, when I was just listening to you too, is I was thinking like there is such a stigma in men and women both, of course, in the idea that being really emotional and just expressing your emotions and feeling your emotions however, whenever, is a weakness thing, right? And yet your body will bring up weakness physically in a way, if you don't allow yourself to sort of feel that and be weak, like it will physically impart onto you. So as much
I
as
love
we
that.
want to, as much as we want to think that we are being mentally strong by like, then you will be physically weak. Like it's going to come up one way or another, right?
Yeah. I mean, talk about genius point. Yes. I love, love, love the way that you kind of like pulled all of that together. And it is so true that, and the biggest thing for me, because I lost such physical health as a teenager, when you think you're supposed to be in like the most strength, the most vibrant health ever. For me, the biggest thing has always been longevity and having quality of life 80 plus, because when I was, in my teens and I'd be talking, I always had friends that were like decades older than me, and I'd be talking to them and they'd be like, or I'd be talking to them at tango, because I picked up tango as a way to move in a way that wasn't high impact like other sports. And it'd be Friday night. All my friends would be at high school football games, and I'd be at tango with people, 10, 20, 30, 40 years older than me. And I'd be like, all right, guys, like I gotta go. My hips are really hurting. And they're like, what? And they're like about to dance like 2 more hours. They're, so much older than me. And they're like, wow, wait till you get to be our age. And I'm like, I look like the picture of health on the outside, but you don't know what I'm feeling internally in my body, right? And so that would create emotions as well. And so that's where I've always been really focused on feeling good in your body late into your years, because so much of our exercise is around gains and CrossFit and this and looking a certain way. And that's all fabulous. But to me, it is about having that physical strength long into our years so we can just simply get up and off the toilet. We can get out of bed without breaking a hip, like all of those things. And anything else on top of that is a bonus. But yeah, it's like we've got to let ourselves confront feeling weak, because if we can't even just face the self-talk of what that feels like to fall into your emotions and to sit there and to just be in them and to feel the self-talk of like, you mother effer, you're so weak, you're so this, and just like degrading ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't sit in that and confront that, we'll never move through it. It'll always be playing that tape in the
Mm-hmm.
background, whether we can actually hear it or not. And so I love that you said, like, yeah, we got to allow ourselves to feel a little emotionally weak so we can strengthen and ultimately have that physical strength long into our years versus it just like pulling. I just picture this like, they would talk about like energy vampires. Like, are you being your
Yeah.
own energy vampire by
That's
not
good.
letting yourself feel the things? And it's just putting this drain and this burden on you every single day.
Yeah. I know, because I'm sure you can say this for yourself also. There is nothing weak. Like the strength, the fear, the uncertainty that it takes to show up and say, I'm going to deal with the hard feelings. I'm going to face this fear. I'm going to face this unhealed grief. I'm going to face, like, whatever it is, there is nothing weak about deciding that you're going to dig in and do it and pull it all out by the roots, no matter what it takes. I mean, there's just nothing weak about it. So it's crazy to me that somehow in our society, we started programming ourselves and each other with this idea that expressing your emotions was something that was weak. Because I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of anything that takes more strength,
Mm-hmm.
honestly.
Absolutely. And if you think about it too, one of the reasons I see it as such like a victory moment of strength is because you are the only one that can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else can do it for you. There's a lot of things that we can delegate, we can outsource, but we can't put anybody else between our own two ears and help us navigate the darkness that's within us.
For
And
sure.
so to come out the other side of it, knowing that you did have to journey through it yourself, like, yes, you can have external support, you can have anchors, you can have life rafts, like all of these things that can help you journey through it. But ultimately, like, you're the one that has to say, like, I'm going on this journey. I'm
Mm-hmm.
facing this moment in my life. I'm facing this that is still carrying with me, that's still impacting the decisions that I'm making in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see the opposite of that all the time. We see people that are still numbing out, that their choice is, whether it's booze or drugs or sex or shopping or overachieving or whatever they're doing to not face it, is just kicking that can down. Like I always say, that's exactly when it's going to start to show up in your body. Like
For
the
sure.
longer you avoid it, but at the end of the day, you think that you're somehow coping. But to me, ignoring it, putting your head in the sand around it, which is what I think all these avoidant numbing techniques really are, is in some ways on the surface easier than just buckling down and facing it and feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people continue to do that for sure.
Yeah.
Numbing
A-
and
And just think of like how much it extends the pain.
oh,
Right.
absolutely.
Like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it in the moment because we're so brilliant at distracting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a coping mechanism for a reason. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
that air of like, I'm fine, everything's together.
Yeah.
But like you said, there are different ones that society kind of praises the numbing for and ones that it doesn't. So it praises the overachieving, being that extra everything in every front of your life, but not taking care of yourself. So we
Mm-hmm.
praise the one, but then we don't praise the drugs, the alcohol, the different overeating, like the other ways of numbing out. And so just looking and seeing like, well, what ways am I choosing to numb out? How does it feel like it's serving me? Because it's got a positive intention. And I think when you can tune into the positive intention versus, again, our inclination is to go towards, well, shoot, I just realized that I've been numbing out all these years, even if it wasn't a quote unquote positive way. Now I'm going to judge myself for that. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, nope, let's hold it back. Let's take it back a step, because if we judge ourselves, we like lock down the ability to transform it. And so you got to be curious and you got to think like, okay, well, what has been the positive intention up until this moment of numbing out, how has it served me? And how am I choosing right now that I'm aware of it, that I'm going to make a different decision moving forward so I can release this and it's not going to impact my life in these really ninja ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I like ninja ways.
Right.
I like that phrase for sure. Let's dig a little into, in particular. So I'm a big fan of embodiment as a way to start to really reconnect to ourselves. Because, like I said, I think that's what this whole process is that we compartmentalize, we numb out, we find some coping that causes this disconnection in us. So, and I think that there's a certain amount of embodiment work, and you can probably share some like really basic things people can start doing that are not scary, because for me personally, I always felt like I should go take a belly dancing class, because I think it would be like the most awkward, embarrassing thing I could probably. I'm not a great dancer. I don't have very good rhythm. And I just think it would be the most awkward thing I could possibly do for myself. And yet at the same time, I know that it would absolutely like tap into an energy and break free sort of these energetic blocks, emotional blocks that I have in my body. And so I always think that, but you don't have to go super extreme, like taking belly dancing. What are some basic ways, and why have you seen, or why do you believe that finding ways to get into your body, to start moving your body in some sort of intentional and aware way, helps us to kind of break up these things and process these stored emotions?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, there's so much within that.
I know.
That's so good. But the first thing is like following your intuition and where you're pulled to. So like you're pulled to belly dancing for some reason for you. Like that's the pull to follow, and I challenge you to question that story of who told you you don't have rhythm.
Yeah.
Like where
That's
does that
probably
come
true.
from?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I love teaching vibe and embodiment, which is the main embodiment method that I use, which is intuitive movement. I don't even call it dance because people have stories around, well, they're not a dancer. They don't have rhythm. They can't do it. They don't look good when they move. And so it's really about finding the movement within that really resonates with you, confronting that fear of those stories, breathing through them, and then finding that ecstasy on the other side when you just let yourself just like flow to the music and start to find your expression, and that confidence starts to build after you meet that edge of how uncomfortable, how fearful, I don't know what to do. Oh, wait, I actually do know what to do, because your body is brilliant. Like we are an animal. Like, do we ever judge animals in nature when all of a sudden they start sprinting away from something? And we're like, well, aren't they weirdos for sprinting away? Like it's such a gorgeous day, nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden there's either a tsunami or there's something that they could detect because they are so in tune with their bodies. And we have that same intelligence within us. We've just been so taught to live up in our heads and strategizing and using that human part of our brain to excel, to get ahead, to achieve all the things in our modern world. But when it comes to getting into the body to process it, so one of the ways that I like to think of it is like if you have like a little bell curve. So we have a thought, which generates a feeling, which generates an action in our body. And so if we have that thought that starts to create that emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, fear, worry, depression, excitement, happiness, joy, love, if we're not in a space to really feel it through the full sensation of the emotion, so it's like the emotion kind of goes up and it peaks at the top of the bell curve, and then it's going to dissipate and diffuse on the other side as our body feels and releases it. But for most of us, we're in such a high stress, go, go, go environment that we take all of these emotions that we feel at the intense peak of the bell curve, and we're like, oop, that's too much. I don't have the space to feel that right now. Let me just grab that and hold that. And when I have the space, when I have the capacity, because emotions, they're learning lessons for us. It's feedback for us. The
Mm-hmm.
body's like, I'm gonna hold that. And when you've got the space, I'm gonna give it to you. And I'm gonna let you feel it and I'm gonna let you process it. So if you've ever had those times where you've been going, and you finally have some downtime. And then you're like, where the F is all of this coming from? Like, I just had a day, I just wanted to watch a movie. I just wanted to go to the farmer's market, like whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're in a super grumpy mood, or you just feel heavy, you feel uncomfortable. Your body is trying to share all of this sensation and feedback that you hadn't had the time to process in your 60-80 hour work week, or just whatever that looks like in home life for you.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start to slow down, when we start to work with our nervous system to get in a calmer, healing state, we give the body more capacity to feel those little itty bitty things on a daily basis rather than them stacking up. So I'm a huge believer and pusher for all of my clients to take these mini breaks throughout the day, whether that's just like 2 minutes every hour, every 2 hours, but just these little 2 minute breaks. That could be closing your eyes and just taking a deep breath and just feeling, am I fatigued? Am I anxious? Am I like, what is the sensation that I'm feeling? Because a lot of times we're all on screens throughout our day, we're on our phones, and we get fatigued because our eyes are fatigued, not our actual body. And so
Mm-hmm.
just by closing your eyes for 2 minutes at the end of each hour during your workday, that's an amazing way to connect to your body and say, hey, I'm checking in with you. How are you doing? Oh, you're feeling a lot and you've got this huge meeting coming up in 15 minutes. Okay, I hear you. This is a lot. I feel that you're trying to push through right now. I get it. We need to do that for this moment. And when we get to the other side of it, like, we're going to take a moment, we're going to step outside and we're going to shake this out. And so even sometimes just checking in with your body and letting it know, like, hey, I know you don't have the space to process this in this moment, but we're going to circle back so that way we can. I feel is just a great way to honor and communicate with our bodies versus being like, you dumb bee, like, push that down, push through, like, get the
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's like, hey, like, sweet girl, like, talking to that inner
Yeah.
child of
Yeah.
like, I'm not ignoring you. I hear your needs. I know we're not taking action on them right in this moment, but like, I do hear them. I am going to provide space. I'm going to provide the resources for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think we talk about this pretty much no matter who I talk to and what topic we talk to. It's about really being able to connect back to yourself and just listen. Just
Mm-hmm.
listen and acknowledge what it is that you need. Like you said, whether or not it's something that we can do in that moment, just acknowledging it, just even like we would with children, right? With
Yep.
our nieces, nephews, our own children, our grandchildren. Like, if they were upset and you saw they were having a meltdown, whether you can fully address and resolve the whole thing in that moment or not, if you crouch down and you look them in the eye and you say, I know this is a really hard moment for you. And what can we do right now? Take some breaths. Let's figure this out. And as soon as we get outside, we'll talk this all the way through, whatever that is, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to remember that for most of us, we weren't parented that way.
Right.
And yeah, and all the life experiences have driven us in this way of just pushing through. And so just breaking it down and saying, hold on, let's not just go through this blindly. Let's not acknowledge this. Let's just take a moment and say, this is
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. And I mean, I think for me personally, part of like with the belly dancing thing, why that appeals to me so much and why there's some part of me that calls to that is because it also seems incredibly feminine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just seems super girly. And I think the way that most of us have pushed through and not allowed, because there's this whole idea not being a victim, right? I think psychology went through this evolution where there was like this real embodiment of being a victim, like during the late 70s and early 80s, well, most of the 80s. And then it kind of pushed out, and then it became the opposite. It was, we will not be a victim. You will not stop us. You will not shut us up, all that kind of stuff. But that form of coping really pushed us all into this very masculine energy of being and doing. And so I know certainly for me, that was how I survived. And it had a place to be action oriented, to be pragmatic, to be very logical, to not be emotional, to say, I don't have the time and space for this. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? Like, like I had a daughter, I had a business, I had other people dependent. Like, I don't have time for that. And so you talk about like tuning in intuitively, and I am an intuitive, so that's also very interesting that life pushed me so hard to one way.
Same.
But I can feel it in myself where my body wants to be a girl. My body wants to be a girl. And so I think for most people, and maybe you can just talk to this for a minute about how do we, so once we start acknowledging, okay, you're feeling some kind of way, how do we start to really listen to what type of embodiment, what type of movement is it that our body is going to most respond to, allow there to be the most kind of processing and releasing that happens?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Again, so juicy. So much that we can dive into with just that because yeah, same. Like I was overly masculine for so long and questioned like all things around that. Don't know how I would have done growing up in this age. But
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, let me collect my thoughts because there's just like so much goodness there. Because in terms of tapping into the feminine, like especially our intuition really lies in that part of us, whether you're male or female. Like
Correct.
we
Yeah.
both have masculine and feminine energy that lives within us.
Mm-hmm.
And
And we
for
all have
many,
intuitive connection. We all
100%.
do. I say that to
Yep.
people all the time too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it's that animal instinct is like,
Yeah.
if it feels too woo for you, like
Mm-hmm.
remember, like we are animals. We have that wiring and that is our intuition. We just don't know how to listen to it.
Yeah.
We overcomplicate it. But
Mm-hmm.
for that tapping into our feminine has felt like we got to be girl bossy. We got to do this. We got to take care of all the people. And then maybe we can also have our feminine energy as well. But we've like kind of stamped that down so much that we don't even know how to step into it or we feel so much judgment around it. And there's so many women
Yeah.
who come into my program who grew up in very religious households who have an even stronger block around tapping into their feminine because it's coupled with sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
because there is such that programming from a religious background that even just moving and starting to move their hips, just gently moving their hips. There's so much rigidness and tightness and tension in the body that's keeping them in this closed, kind of very masculine, just keep focusing on achieving, just keep moving forward and backward,
Mm-hmm.
but don't go side to side or in this figure eight or in this motion, which, if you think of men and that masculine energy, they typically have very linear lines of thinking where if you have women, like our brains are like a ball of yarn where it's like crisscrossing and doing all this stuff. And so if you think of our movement, most of our movement that we've been taught is very linear. Do a bicep curl, do a
Yeah.
jumping jack. It's all in these very linear planes of movement. And we don't know how to do this very like nourishing wave of movement that just accesses something different within us. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
self-talk, there's beliefs, there's all these like nuanced layers that hold us in these rigid movement patterns. And that's where I love music to help us tap in to whatever energy it is that we're needing to express. There's this phrase in coaching called pace, pace, lead. And so it's helping you meet your client where they're at. So if you have a client, for instance, that comes in and they're like, "Hey, Sierra, how are you doing today?" And you're like, "Hey, Sam, oh my God, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited for our session today." There's like this agitation
Mm-hmm.
that's created where they're like, "Whoa, what am I
It's a
stepping into?"
disconnect.
It's a
Yeah.
disconnect, right? So pacing helps you connect with them, meet them where they're at, and then you can start to lead into the other energy. So if you're in really angry energy, put on some Linkin Park, like put on some
Oh
of
my
these
God,
different, yes, put on some of these different bands that have this just intense energy. Like you don't have to put on like full screamo, but like get some ones where they're just letting it out.
yes.
There's
Mm-hmm.
heavier drums, there's just heavier notes being hit where you can deepen into your body and let yourself feel that type of energy. And then as that's starting to process out, you'll feel a little lighter. And maybe you want to put on some Beatles energy that's like very uplifted because that's where you want to go for your afternoon. And so it's helping you step into the energy you're wanting to embody. But first, you got to process the energy that's blocking you from stepping into the energy that you want to feel.
Oh, that's so good. That is such an excellent tip because I think a lot of people, like we just want to fix something. Again, that's
Mhm.
kind of very masculine energy, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But we're like, oh, I'm just gonna find the happiest, most cheerful music ever because I don't want to feel like this anymore. So I think it's so, so important and so good that you just said, find where you're at
Mhm.
first and again process, allow yourself to move through it and then start shifting and changing because man,
Yeah,
not just the music, that's true for everything, that's true for
totally.
all the aspects of our life for sure.
Otherwise, it's just like kind of brushing it under the rug or
Sure.
that the phrase like toxic positivity, like that's where that
Mm-hmm.
would come in because you're just trying to tap into the feeling and cover up what's underneath. But then you're totally creating that iceberg effect where you're burying it deeper and deeper and it's just going to burst one day. And so, yeah, you've got to give yourself space to really be in it and feel in it. And that's one of the reasons where I love Vibe so much, which is the method that I share because it's nonverbal processing. You don't actually have to think about it. You don't have to go through the story. You don't have to say, this person did this happened, this happened, this happened. You
Mm-hmm.
just have to be in your body. You have to feel the energy of the song, focus on breathing. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
literally just put on the song, close your eyes, just start to breathe and be like, okay, what am I feeling? Where is it in my body? What's the beat of the song? Okay, how does my body want to express to this point? Like maybe it's just like nodding my head, maybe it's shifting my hand, maybe it's just tapping my foot. And I just start right there and I find that steady rhythm. And then I get start to get into it a little bit more and I can start to feel this release starting to happen. But you don't have to be thinking about what you're releasing. You just have to deepen the breath and let your body like unfold and unravel what has been waiting to just like release. Cause it's not that you have to think or figure it out or solve it. You literally just have to ride that second wave of that bell curve and let it out.
Mm-hmm. I got chills when you were talking about that because I literally can only imagine, and I know it to be somewhat true for myself, but I can only imagine when we fully release, when we fully allow ourselves to let go and be fluid and be in the flow of things, how that shifts everything about you, everything to
Yeah.
your core being, that vibrational change, that energetic shift, because you shed all of this pent
Mm.
up stuff, right? All the time. And I think the movement stuff is certainly something. I think I told you this when we were chatting back and forth for email. Like, I know I need to do more embodiment work for myself. And I also think that, because of different things in my life, certain traumas in my life, there is this rigidity about being in my body, and you know, some physical abuse, whatnot. And so you want to stay very in control of your physical body. Of course, I was doing that emotionally, mentally too. And I let go of that parts. But it's funny how the physical, wanting to still stay physically in control of my body and my space, is like kind of the last piece that I've held on to. And I think, you know, the other important thing that you just said also was that we don't have to talk therapy everything out. And I say this all the time, like, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I've been in a ton of therapy at different times in my life. There's definitely a role and a place for it. But for those people, men, maybe even more in particular, that don't want to talk about it, that don't want to have to recall the memory, they can't recall the memory, there are other ways to start healing and shifting and releasing. I think the embodiment stuff is super awesome, because I think it's a great way if you're not mentally ready to go there, or you find talking about it exhausting.
Yeah. And just think too, how amazing would it be if you could start at the body and release it from the body and feel it ravel up through the mental and the emotional? Because I was reading this stat that said a third of adults who have arthritis also suffer with anxiety and depression. Like the physical state of our body greatly impacts our mental state. And even when we do, like, we've done all that work, we've coached, we've therapized, we've talked it out, we've released it with tapping and belief work and different things. And then you can still feel this constraint in your body. And you're like, well, what is wrong? Like, I've literally done so much work. What is this block? What is this stagnancy that I'm still hitting up against that I literally can't think of anything else for? So it's like, how cool would it be if we can couple the two together? Like, I'm always a huge, like you said, a huge proponent of having your wellness team. We need so many different modalities in our life to service us on a holistic level. But just thinking, if we could bring this movement in earlier in our journeys to release this, to get into our bodies versus it being the thing that's last. And a lot of times I liken it to just how badly we've formed relationships or made those mental ties to exercise and ourselves, of like, well, you know, like there's just so much story around exercise and weight and different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like we started kind of, I think, towards the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how we're so all in our heads. Well, if all you're doing is looking to create change and deal with our emotions from such a headspace, and we never tap into the other spaces, then yeah, you're always going to have a limited amount of result, because we can't do it all from our heads. We just can't. We can't, no matter what we have been taught and trained. But I think we're starting to see that shift for sure.
We are.
Samantha, can you tell everyone how to connect with you, learn more about this vibe program, the embodiment work that you do? Where can they find you?
Yes. Well, you can find me on Instagram, is like the place social wise that I hang out the most. My handle's at Vibe with Sam Schmuck. And then you can find me on the website, samanthaschmuck.com. You'll be able to find Vibe and Embodiment. So we have an 8-week program that's coming up for our next round this September. We do 2 rounds each year. So it really is an 8-week program. We dive into parts work, timeline work, and all of these coaching tools that you can now become your own coach. So that way, if it's 11 o'clock at night, you don't have access to your coach or therapist, whomever, you now have these tools to really sit and guide yourself through a process to feel and move through whatever it is that you're processing. We've also got the Vibe and Embodiment membership, which is 2 90-minute live sessions a month. So that way, I like to think of them as like the little pressure releases. So if you're just like running through your life, you're not holding space for yourself to process. You now know when I join this, I've got 2 times each month to really feel, be in my body and process things in a big way. And then I've got a stress relief course, which is tapping and breathwork tools. Like if moving in your body to music feels a little too far past your comfort zone to start, I'd start with those stress relief tools, because those are going to help you start to tap into your body to feel that shift in your nervous system when it downshifts, and just start to build that capacity to feel those itty bitty things during the day so they don't build up in the body.
Awesome. And just for clarity, those things are virtual or in person or both?
All of the things that I just mentioned are all virtual. And then occasionally I'll do in-person vibe workshops, but the membership, the immersion, both of those are virtual. So anywhere you're at in the States or beyond, you can join us.
Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. Intuitively, I got a little hit about a retreat. Do you have any plans for a retreat?
I love doing retreats with people. I don't have any. Well, actually, I'm going to Canada next month with a friend that I'm mainly helping her with her retreat, but I don't have any further ones planned for the rest of this year yet. But if there's anyone out there who wants to collaborate, I love retreats.
I was going to say, yeah, just so you know, a little intuitive hit there for you. They were saying to me about that you need to do a retreat and have like a full 4-day retreat.
I want to.
Yeah, work on that. Thank you again so much for being here. This was a fantastic conversation. I know we could have definitely kept talking for sure. Thank you to all of the sojourners out there that are joining me on these conversations each week. Ask that you subscribe, follow along so you don't miss an episode. And leave us some reviews, leave us some comments and thoughts about what you want to hear more about. So thanks, everyone. And until next week.